go in and dive into habit number 2. It's super exciting. We're talking about going to bed early today and this week. Try to restrain your excitement, but we'll start with just a little kind of like we did last week, a brief centering practice, and then open up the floor afterward to see if there's anything that anybody wants to share in terms of how their week has been going after implementing some of the earlier lighter dinner from last week. Would love to hear how that's been going for people. There's a little thing I want to share with you that's been really helpful for me. So I'll draw a little bit for you in terms of just like how I see the growth path, the development path, and especially when it comes in terms of like shelving old habits or old ways of being, and then when those things sort of fall off the shelf and back into our lives, as they inevitably always just do, I think. I'm part of the why behind that. Welcome, Joy. Thanks for being here. So yeah, and then into some information about early to bed, and then possibly some reflection time and interaction for the end of the call. I almost felt tempted to just like move us all over to Shauna's restorative class that happens at 7 o'clock, but I not this time, I guess. If anybody feels called to go into that class at 7, feel free. That is one of your classes that you get in the Journey to the Peak package. So the restorative yoga practice is hugely aligned with what we'll be talking about today, just in terms of like giving the body the physiology, the rest that it needs, and really deserves, but that's definitely necessary for thrive, right? For thrive, for balance, for feeling better. So much of this stuff, it starts with our nights, right? You're going to see as we move through these weeks, like why we had to start with earlier, lighter dinner, and then that feeds into early to bed. And then it all kind of that determines the way that your next morning starts. So that's that. Before I get too far ahead of myself, why don't we do some centering? Just like find a space where you can kind of, whatever that looks like to you. It can be a camera on, camera off. It could be lying down. The whole thing won't be more than a couple of minutes, but I'd love for you to just close your eyes if that feels accessible to you. Take a couple of nice, long, deep breaths that really help you arrive here. You might even explore inhaling through the nose and then exhaling through an open mouth. Another one I like is to, after the inhale, do my exhale like I'm blowing out my mouth with a straw. And I'll invite you to take a series of more breaths just like that. And while you're here, make that inquiry towards yourself of just like, how are you feeling? Where are you at right now? You might even like to use that metric of somewhere from 1 to 10 to really just gauge, not for anything or anyone other than yourself, where your energy is at, where your mood is at. You might even be checking in with what quality of hunger or satiation are you experiencing right around this time. It's going to be different for every single one of us. And then in these last couple of breaths, last couple of moments, invitation to check back in with that why. And maybe you've concretized your anchor statement down into something that is like a mantra. You could just sort of state it simply, and it's your why. And this why, this anchor statement, this why it can change. Even if it's not concretized into a statement, feel free to just remind yourself, even if there aren't words attached to it, but to just energetically listen in and own that whatever that intuition is that's propelling you into your beingness, your why, your intention, your purpose. When you're ready, just introduce some movement into the body, maybe by taking the hands and rubbing them together. And then you might open the palms over the face and just receive some of the energy that you created with your hands. And when you drop them down, open up the eyes again and start to make your way back to the screen. So yeah, I'd love to just open this up for, a quick round of like brags or wins or around stuff that's been challenging, like not wins perhaps. Feel free to throw something in the chat, even if it's like 1 or 2 words. Or if there's anything that anybody wants to share, you're welcome to speak it into the space now.
Yeah, so thank you guys. I want to share, I have a lot of background noise, so there may be distraction, if you can't hear me. So I'm definitely in a place in my life where my external environment is supporting and my energetic this course, the habits that heal. I mean, I went for years. I can't wait to hear what you're going to say next, Patrick, because I know I went for years just not being successful in that. And I've been asking for this. And then when I heard this program was happening, I'm like, this is what I've been asking for. So one of my blessings in the last couple of weeks has been the way the universe has supported me. I just was actually in Maui for a week with a family that eats early, light dinners, goes to bed early, wakes up early. Waking up with the sunrise. A couple of days I woke up with the sunrise and then I laid back down to rest because I specifically was going to some physical healing in my body for rejuvenation. So I thought, do I want to stick to my goal or do I want to let my body rest? So just feeling those differences. So in that area, I did have a few times where there was more people over, so it was a later and had some foods that were just heavier and immediately and noticed the difference in that. So it feels good to feel that contrast. And I can see the challenge for me is that I'm going to be traveling and being in different people's homes. And I could just see the difference when I'm not, like if I'm 2-3 weeks in one space and I have that morning routine, how strong it is. And then when I start jumbling it, I don't feel the same energy throughout the day, which is surprising to me because I never really had this consistency of habit. So that's a little bit of my share for now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all, because it's so important to reflect on like where you're at, and so useful for acknowledging where you're going next, really too. So let me first share our group guidelines. So we went through all of these on the first call, and then we'll spend time on one of them each week. And so if there's one volunteer that wants to read, listen deeply, because I feel like I've already heard it coming up, even just in this call, in the way that I can tell everyone's so present with one another's shares. So if somebody just wants to unmute themselves and read through guideline number 6, listen deeply, I'd appreciate it.
I'll go. Listen deeply. Your listening has depth that you should actively dive into when you're with your group. When you do, an evolutionary tension arises that propels your group into dynamic growth. When your group meets, practice and receive deep listening. Listening deeply means you participate 100% in receptivity mode. When a member speaks, you connect with the essence beneath their words. You turn up your care and allow yourself to be impacted by their edge. Deep listening is the glue that holds an evolutionary conversation together.
I think that's so cool, like the glue that holds the conversation together. And Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for reading that, Joy. So let me share my screen here. I want to just draw this quadrant out for you really quickly because I found it to be really helpful for me in my own growth path. And I keep coming back to these quadrants. So this vertical pole, we're going to call like being in accordance with oneself. And so we'll call this up here in accord. Some of you have seen me do this before, and this will be out of accord. And we're going to call this one about unconscious and conscious over here. So the horizontal pole is like what you are aware of versus what you're not aware of. And I would say that for most of us, kind of most humans in general that are growing up in this day and age, we're born into the world and based on, you know, mainstream culture and consumerism and we talked about last week with the Industrial Revolution, more or less shifting dinner that used to be something that happened in the middle of the day, like literally, we've swapped dinner and supper because supper meant both supplemental and soup. It has etymologies in both, and that happened later in the day. All of those things have kind of like led us to being more or less in this quadrant with a lot of our habits, right? So that we don't even necessarily know that we're doing it because everybody else is just they're having their late heavier dinner, they're going out to the bars, they're going out and partying. And this depends on what culture you're in. This was very much the culture that I was brought up in, not like my mom raised me going out to the bars, but like when I was in college, we would get out of rehearsals at 10:30 p.m. or so, and then that would be time for the party to start. Like, and that's when the night really started, 10:30 p.m. So you can't even imagine what time we wrapped things up. And so when I'm saying out of accordance, it's with things like our physiology. It's out of balance. It is out of integrity of purpose, right? And so we kind of land here, and we'll call these, I don't really love the term bad habits, but we'll call these bad habits. And the thing with a lot of habits, the fact that they're automatic, habits are automatic behaviors, we're not even necessarily aware of them. And so usually what happens is that we learn or we get exposure to good habits. And I call this basically like walking the path of awareness. And it comes to us in many different ways. Teachers, doctors, wellness professionals, healthy habits of friends, sometimes just by listening to our own internal desire and intuition, we walk the path of awareness so that we end up in this upper right quadrant. So now that we're consciously acting, go away, in accordance with ourselves. Does that make sense? And I would include things, for me at least, and I'll let you put your stuff in your own quadrants. But for me, this is earlier, lighter dinner. Based on how I know I feel the next morning when I wake up, rejuvenated, light, excited, fresh, happy to start the day, inspired, want to do things. So it's early to bed too. It's basically all the 10 Dinacharya habits, things that are in accordance. And I'm consciously acting in accordance with myself. Now, the thing that I was speaking about with Joy a moment ago is that what inevitably happens because of conditioning, because of the weight of old patterns, because the environment that you're living in and the people that you're around may be having habits that are different, the ones that you have discovered are in accordance with yourself, we kind of get pulled down back to this quadrant. And we're now in this place where we're consciously acting out of accordance with self, right? And it's weird because it's like, wait, I'm not trying to do something that I know is not good for me, and yet I keep doing it anyways. And so I just invite that, like, I could say, and I'll put it in a friendly color, be gentle with yourself. Go for the B- while you're here. Use the Kaizen approach so that you make the small and incremental changes, and just know that it's like the habits that you're trying to change, you've likely been doing the opposite of them for a lot longer than you've been trying to change them. So I invite a lot of gentleness, even just with myself, with you all, as you develop the new habits. But ultimately, we end up here, right? This for me is like, brushing teeth. I don't have to think about brushing teeth. It's just something that I'm not necessarily unconscious while I'm doing it, but it's not a question. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when, right? And then that question of when, that becomes a big thing for the habit trigger, right? Having something to trigger the healthy habit. So unconsciously acting according to with self, this would be like feeling fatigue and then going to sleep and not thinking twice about like, oh, but I got to push through. Let me just like stay up an extra hour, extra half hour, whatever it is. It's just, there's no question about it. You feel the fatigue and then you go to sleep. Okay, so that's the quadrant share. Any questions on that? Does that make sense, more or less? Here's early to bed. Welcome to habit number 2. And the big question is why? One of the reasons is that we don't want to spend tomorrow's fuel today. And so I'm going to come back really quick to the iPad to just remind ourselves of what this Ayurvedic clock tells us. If you were on the call last week or you're able to watch the call last week, you remember that more or less Ayurveda thinks of the day, I'm still in pink here, which I guess is not bad, in 3 different portions, okay? Oh my God, it's not a great geometrically balanced shape. That's okay. So, you got your 12 p.m. here, your 12 a.m. here, 10 to 2, right? We call this the Pitta time. You don't need to know that word, but it just basically means the energy is rising, right? It's different than the Kapha time. I'll put Kapha in blue here because the energy is downward there. So this is 6 p.m. So from 10 to 2, we've got Pitta. From 6 to 10 is Kapha. And then in the middle is the Vata energy. Vata sort of just sends the energy all over the place, right? It's light, it's airy. Vata is very air-based. Pitta is very fire-based. And Kapha is really like water and earth. They're all 2 elements. So this is fire and earth. And Vata is air and ether, actually. So it's our 5 elements all combined, right? Water, fire, earth, air, and ether. And so we talked last week about really trying to eat your big meal between 10 a.m. Why? I have no idea what I just did. I'm sorry. There it is. Okay. We talked about really trying to eat your big meal between 10 and 2 in the daytime. And so that's the time that you're trying to eat the thing that is going to be most nourishing for the body. In terms of like nutritional value, you want to get that in there. And then doing the soup or the salad kind of more between this 2 and 6, and really 6, or for whatever it is for you. If you already eat late, you're trying to go for an earlier 7, 8 p.m. dinner, whatever it is for you, letting the kitchen be closed after that point. And kitchen closed sort of starts to kick us off into the next habit, which is early to bed. So if we look at this as being 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., that's kind of the middle of the day, right? That's when we were talking about eating that big meal. But then we can also do the opposite and look at this as 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. And so the energy does rise again, right? We'll say that this is 6 p.m. and we've stopped eating ideally by this point, and we use this Kapha time, the downward energy, to start to align our own energy with that which is, Kapha is very cohesive. It's very yummy. It's very, it's got this like the quality of mud and cohesion, and it's a great time to kind of just enjoy, go out for a walk, read a book, play a couple of games, do some chores around the house, whatever that thing is. But it's not the time that you want to be eating. The time that you want to be eating is when the digestion fire is high. That's pitta. So what I was saying is when this cycles around, right, and we get to 10 p.m., the energy is rising again. The pitta fire, that energy is rising again. And if you're still awake, from this Ayurvedic perspective, if you're still awake at that time, your energy will rise with it and you'll get that second wind, whatever that second wind is. I think night owls really experience this. And I was experiencing this after rehearsal in college at 10:30. And let me tell you, it was a second wind. We were really like, everything was very heightened and alive. So when I say that we start to borrow energy from the next day, it's because this fire, this rising energy that you're tuning into, if you're tapping into the night owl thing, it's actually meant to kind of, am I still here? Sorry, my screen was going weird for a second. It's actually meant to move through the body and to cleanse and to process that which needs digesting and that which needs processing. Because we can't just think of digestion as like the food that we put into our bellies that needs digesting. Digestion, everything gets digested. Everything that you learn, every conversation that you have, every interaction that you have at work with your kids, the things that happen in your life, that needs digesting. So if you've ever caught yourself saying the phrase or hearing the phrase, around a big decision or something kind of big that's going on in your life, oh, let me sleep on it. It's that, right? It's knowing that when you wake up in the morning, you're going to have more clarity to make the decision that is best going to serve you because you've slept on it. And that's because you've allowed whatever it is to sort of sit in the fire, to transform a little bit, and then you see it in its, kind of new way. So jumping back over to the slideshow here, we don't want to spend tomorrow's fuel for today. So if you find yourself being tired, it's because we're probably in a cycle of just doing that repetitively. It's a really nice and beautiful thing to be able to wake up feeling well rested and energized, which I know is a big goal for a lot of the people who are in this group. And that all starts with basically the time that you go to bed. And then we get into this, and this stuff to me is sort of like, I almost wonder like how alarmist I should start to feel or be about this when I look at these stats. The CDC reporting that insufficient sleep is a public health epidemic. And so an epidemic is defined as a widespread occurrence of a disease in a community. And I think we're all in a place where we have a pretty relevant and tangible and accessible context for epidemics and pandemics based on COVID and like where we are recently. So I pulled together, I pulled out this quote right from the CDC website. Like when you go to the sleep page here, the first thing that they say on here is 1/3 of US adults report that they usually get less than the recommended amount of sleep. Not getting enough sleep is linked to many chronic diseases and conditions such as type 2 diabetes, heart disease, obesity, depression that threaten our nation's health. Not getting enough sleep can lead to motor vehicle crashes and mistakes at work. There's another interesting thing I read that it's basically as dangerous as driving drunk. To drive on sleep deprivation is as dangerous as driving drunk. And so there's a lot of injury and disability caused each year because of this. I love this. Getting enough sleep is not a luxury. It is something people need for good health. Sleep disorders can increase a person's risk of health problems. However, these disorders can be diagnosed and treated, bringing relief to those who suffer from them. So there is a way out. There is a light at the end of the tunnel here. And it's just, again, getting out of the way of what the physiology more or less has been designed to do. And that's going to be a big theme that we're just going to keep on coming back to. I think I get to that here a little bit, surrendering to nature's body clock. It is actually what you want to do. When you start to think about you as a primate, more or less, as a being of nature. And I would love for that much more to be your own thing to consider and to invite into your own experience, because I don't really think it's my place to tell you who you are. I think that's that's up to you. That's why you are on this journey and you've signed up and made this commitment to yourself to do the journey to you. I keep loving the name for the course more and more as we move through it. And yeah, I pointed out here at the end that the compound effect, it works both ways. And so if we can start giving ourselves the sleep that our bodies and our minds not only require, but desire, the compound effect is it's gonna grow and grow and grow and grow. And it's like they try to teach people when they're young to invest because of compound interest, and it's a thing. Well, it also happens the other way. So effects can compound negatively as much as they can compound positively. And I think that's some valuable food for thought. I did want to include this slide on the endocrine system based on this point that I'm making here. Like when we get to bed early and we allow ourselves to really to feel your fatigue and to go into rest, and like I'm not going to get into all the different stages of sleep because I don't know too much about those things, but I invite you to research this to the degree to which it interests you and is informative and valuable to you. But to experience deep sleep, experience deep fat burning, and to rebalance the endocrine system. And so I did include, because a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about is linked directly to our endocrine system, which is basically just a series of glands that produces and secretes hormones that the body uses for a wide range of functions. Including respiration, including metabolism, reproduction, sense perception, movement, sexual development, and growth. Hormones are produced by glands and sent into the bloodstream to the various tissues of the body. They send signals to those to tell them what they're supposed to do. When the glands do not produce the right amount of hormones, diseases develop that can affect many aspects of life. And so I really feel like this is just an opportunity to like make an effort to live a disease-free life. Or if you're currently working with some sort of disease or autoimmune issue, like this is something that you can do. Science says, like the CDC says, that this is something that you can do to start to reverse some of those effects. So I just want to pause here and just see if there's anything that's surfacing for anybody that you want to voice. As always, you're welcome to put those things in the chat too.
I'm a little curious about like if you have to do it every night, like does it matter if you decide, since I'm trying to just do Monday through Friday, so if I stay up on the weekend, am I ruining what I've already done? Like, am I going to like, is it not going to be a habit? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. My thought is no. Like my thought is no, it doesn't ruin it. But one of the biggest things I'm going to continue to advocate for is just like self-experimentation. Like is it moving you closer to your why? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. But yeah, but I'm thinking about my social life this summer.
Absolutely. And that's where I'll go back to the B-. You know, I'm an actor. You know what I mean? So once theater opens up, I'm really curious to see what this is going to look like for me moving into a performance schedule again, where sometimes like that doesn't start until 8 p.m. But what I'm more or less realizing is that like that's all built into these habits. The suggestion to eat the earlier, lighter dinner and then to do something that is active after dinner and then to feel my fatigue and then to move from there into sleep. But yeah, for me personally, it doesn't mean that I'm never going to go to an opening night party or if there's some special friend who's celebrating. But again, it's me asking myself, okay, how do I want to feel the next morning? And then maybe at that opening night party, I have one less drink than I had, a few years ago. It's not me getting blackout drunk, the way it would have been a few years ago. So it's a highly personal thing. And I don't want to be the one to tell you what to do, but rather to put you in choice. I'll always come back to this idea of like, you should be the one in choice over the things going on in your life. Yeah, there was some really interesting research that I was reading on all of that. I've been like skimming a whole bunch of stuff. I shared a really fascinating article on the group that let me just scroll through it really quickly here because it's really valuable. And I do also want to say, like, based on your share just there, Brigitte, it just made me think of, and everything that's been said is kind of like that zoom out a little bit to really understand, like, well, where are the priorities here? And if you can be someone who's constantly evaluating your priorities, because change is going to happen. The change thing is inevitable. The variable is going to happen. But if you can sort of say, okay, well, what's important to me in this situation? That's a great trigger thing. That's a great habit, like a thought habit to kind of have come up for you, instead of like, oh, but like, instead of the guilt that might come in, or for me, it's like, I'm such a rebel. Like, I will just rebel for the sake of rebelling, and like letting that be the thought that kind of intercedes or interjects is like, well, what is important to me here? And I'm also really of the mindset that if my friends all want to go out, at 10 p.m. and it's really important for me to go out and meet them at 10 p.m., then the Patrick that's going to meet them, they're going to witness a different me because of the things that I've been doing. You know what I mean? And they're going to start to experience me really in a version of me that's truer to myself, because that's the thing that I've identified that I'm trying to do. I'm trying to step more so into my own individuality and my own purpose. And so it's like I'm kind of bringing a better version of myself to that group when I do get together with them, no matter what time it is. You know what I mean? So I kind of like that idea. Let me share this quickly. So this was a great article that was basically a link between our earlier lighter dinner talk that we did last week and how that helps with going to sleep. And in the article, they identify 4 eating behaviors that impact sleep. Eating a diet that's full of processed and refined foods, that's not going to help. Eating late or close to bedtime, that's going to impact sleep. Carbs, actually, they mention that there's some carbohydrates that are kind of helpful for sleep. This is the part where they talk about, no, I can't, it's not right there, so I'll skip over it. But I did also want to point out this new word that I learned. Do any of you know this? Adenosine? I may be mispronouncing that. But it's this adenosine, perhaps, I don't know. It's this chemical that builds up in our bodies throughout the day, causing us to feel less alert and wakeful as the day progresses, which is funny to me because it sounds like it's this bad thing. But looking at it through this lens, I'm like, oh, how beautiful. Something that actually invites me into slowness and invites me into stilling my rhythm and feeling my fatigue, creates sleep pressure. And it's an unconscious biological response that makes us want to sleep. So that's great because it goes right to the quadrant. Like, ultimately, we do get to exist in that realm if we can get away from all the egoic tendencies that we've built up for many, many generations. And so what they're saying here is, oh, I also like this. As we sleep, the plug is pulled in the proverbial sink where we've been accumulating this adenosine, and it empties our body of the potent chemical. And then we start the day fresh with, 0. And then it just slowly accumulates. And then as we sleep, it slowly goes down. Well, they call caffeine a potent adenosine antagonist. And so they say that drinking coffee anytime after, I think really he recommends after noon or 1 p.m. is a no-go. There's somewhere else that says really just don't do it after 6 p.m. or so, because caffeine is going to be the antagonist to this adenosine. Alcohol was mentioned earlier too, and I found this interesting that the dose of alcohol really makes a difference, and that lower doses may increase total sleep time while reducing sleep quality. And then higher doses actually activate the sympathetic nervous system and disrupt sleep. So it puts our body into this state of fight or flight. That's like, basically, okay, we're being attacked. How can I get all of these toxic chemicals out of my body? It's a big job for the physiology, and kind of the opposite thing that we're meant to be doing in those hours of rest. Yeah. Let me just plow through this. Are you seeing Ojas? Yeah, okay, good. I never know when I share my screen what I can toggle around with. So I want to keep kind of sprinkling in some Ayurvedic vocabulary as we move through these weekly calls. And so this week's is Ojas. Ojas is basically like the subtle and refined energy. They liken it to honey that really is something that is sustaining for the body. And so anytime we engage in any of the things that they were just showing in that last slide with the alcohol, caffeine late at night, eating a heavier later dinner, they deplete us of this ojas, this really sweet, sustaining energy, subtle and refined energy that Ayurveda has identified that we have. And I have a link here to a site on Banyan Botanicals. They talk a little bit about ojas there. Oh yeah, and then the science vocabulary, adenosine, the chemical that builds up on our bodies throughout the day, causing us to feel less alert and wakeful as the day progresses. And there's a link to that article that I just shared as well. Okay, so now we get to the how. Like, how are you actually going to make this happen for yourself? And I'll say first and foremost, Kaizen it. The small and incremental change to do what feels realistic and possible and achievable for you as a first step. Very much aligned with the B- thing too. So if you are somebody who likes to stay up late and has a later bedtime, and if you're trying to shift it to an earlier bedtime, Kaizen it 15 minutes, 30 minutes earlier than it would have been the night before, and then just notice what you notice, right? If you try to just do a full overhaul, again, just watch if that's a method of success that works for you or not. We're going to get into this early to bed flow chart in a second, and then we can also share a bit around how we want to construct or architect our evenings. Identify where your obstacles are going to be in this habit, this early to bed habit, and then strategize accordingly. Architecting your environment is huge. I know that I got to a certain point a couple of years ago because my bedroom faces out onto Fort Washington, and there's one of those there's a subway entrance right below my apartment. And when they replaced all the screens and the advertisements with those LED screens, I would lay in bed at night because I like to have the windows open and the blind open so I could see when the sun would come up. And I would just look at basically like a light show on my ceiling. And even with my eyes closed, I could see the shift in light from this LED advertisement that was down, I'm 4 floors up, but still. And so in terms of architecting my environment, like I shut all my blinds one night, closed them down, and I was amazed that I could actually notice the quality of my sleep shifted because of the darker environment. So whatever that looks like for you, for me, getting a dark environment really helped. I have here go for a B-. Feel your fatigue. That is going to be a really big one and a beautiful one to listen intuitively to when your body is telling you it's tired and then to respond to the body. Like, to me, that's so much being in accordance with self. Body tells me I need to go to the bathroom, I go to the bathroom. That's consciously acting in accordance with myself. Body tells me I need to go to the bathroom, and I'm like, okay, let me just wait like 15 more minutes, or like, I don't want to use that bathroom or whatever. It's kind of like consciously acting out of accordance with self, like stripping all that judgment away and just looking at the signaling that the body is telling me it needs. And I'm like, okay, I'm increasing the space between what my body is asking for and when I'm giving it. More information for me. Okay, beware of light exposure. I kind of wanted to watch this with you guys. I'm feeling like we probably shouldn't, so I'll put it in the Facebook group. This is an excellent Andrew Huberman, the Stanford neuroscientist, and he draws out the body temperature over the course of the day, and he explains how our body temperature is really kind of triggered by our exposure to light or lack thereof. So if we can allow our bodies to not have any light exposure, he goes into the different kinds, blue light and whatnot. After a certain amount of time, it'll trigger our body dropping down because our body is at its coolest state when we're sleeping. And then when we get that first exposure to light in the morning, that's the cue for the body temperature to start rising again. So I really recommend watching that video. I'll put it in the Facebook group. And then there's just a few other things that you can do to really ritualize this. Like I highly recommend you making this a ritual for yourselves. And the difference between like ritual and habit to me is that ritual feels sacred. It feels sacred and special. And I heard a definition of the word sacred the other day, that it was something is sacred when there's been a sacrifice, right? It's the thing that makes the act that you're doing, the thing that is sacred. It's the thing that makes it special because something has been sacrificed. And sometimes the more sacred something is, the more special the sacrifice was, right? God didn't ask Abraham to bring, his least favorite animal up to be sacrificed in front of him. He asked him to bring his son, right? And the level of devotion sort of shows that willingness, right? Willingness to sacrifice. So just an example in terms of like what you may be sacrificing for this routine, for this habit, the ritual is going to have a pretty profound return on investment, I would say. So making the ritual, something like a foot massage, I have an essential oil diffuser. So I use that. I put a couple of lavender drops in there and it makes my room smell all pretty and kind of drifts me off into sleep in a nice way. There's a couple of different breath techniques. I'll post a video of one. Usually has to deal with an elongated exhale. It's a breath retention at the top of the inhale, followed by an elongated exhale. I'll post a practice of that. I'll put that on my list. And then reflection. Like I also have reflection here in terms of you might use this time to get curious and reflect about how your day went, to list 3 things that you're grateful for that happened in the day, or to maybe even identify something that happened that didn't necessarily go the way that you wanted it to go, and to use that journaling time to say what action you're going to take tomorrow to bring yourself to more balance, or to do the thing that helps you to act more in accordance with self, if that language works for you. And then I have let's strategize. So here's the early to bed flow chart that they offered me when I was been moving through this training as a yoga health coach. I'd love for us, oh, come on, what's going on? I'd love for us to kind of work through this together. You can see that it really starts with the dinner time. So like, what time do you want your dinner to be? How can you then engage in an activity that brings you joy just for the purpose of enjoying your life? So that was a suggestion of the taking the walk, reading the book, having a conversation, game night. I would recommend something that doesn't use screens, or again, that light, something that eases the body and the physiology more into its natural state of being. Screens have, it's going to be really interesting to see how our civilization and our cultures continue to evolve, because there's so many things that we're doing now and so many habits that we have that are so young. Like screens have not been around for that long. And there's so much science and so much research behind some of the detrimental effects that they're having, right? And same with social media. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens here. Okay, do something kind for your body. That might look like your massage, your foot massage, a warm shower perhaps. And then listen for the first signs of fatigue. How does your body communicate end of day fatigue? How do you start to feel that your, adrenosol is gathering up? And then here you go into this flow chart, right? Make a choice to honor your body's needs. If it's a yes, you get ready for bed. If it's a no, borrow against tomorrow's energy for today. How does your body communicate being run down and worn out? What are the effects that you notice kind of when you do that? That's what that column is for. All right, so get ready for bed, rub your feet, even use oil, meditate, give thanks, leave the day behind. And then you wake up in the morning and you feel like $1,000,000. I'm just curious, like, does anybody have that? Have you had that experience of waking up in the morning and just being like really, Does anybody tapped into that at all? Not even necessarily with these habits, but anytime in your life. which is again that kapha, like that's the environment more in that sort of wet, cohesive. You want that kind of warm blanket over you. You want to be cohesive. You want to kind of all stick together. They're saying that's that kapha energy. And it's really interesting to kind of look at the world with an awareness of these doshas, basically, is what they're called. But yeah, thank you for that, Brigitte. Mom, you look like you were maybe about to say something.
Yeah, I want to say a couple of things, but I have had that sensation more so lately. So I've been able to feel the contrast when I've had it and not had it. And I mean, obviously I was like waking up in Maui the first day, which is another home of mine. I go back to often, but what you just described, like the vibration in my body, and I was staring at the ocean, it was so alive and so vibrant. And I could really just, I was like, this is how I want to keep waking up every morning. And the thing that I want to share, that I want to, you know, it came on earlier to share, is that something that's been so true for me is that to fully have these habits in my life, I know that when I go back to my hometown, based on the experience I've been having this past year with the people I've been the closest with, I mean, I obviously cannot guarantee that these relationships will go away, but based on my experiences and the choices I'm making in these habits for myself, this journey to me, I'm speaking my truth more. My relationships have changed with my neighbors, really, who I've been so close to, and just even hanging out late or having a few beers or having a couple bottles of wine around and we're drinking. And so I have this really deep sadness because I'm going back home there about this aspect. And equally, I have people completely like this group and my friends, like I said, going to Maui, and they're doing these habits and not even knowing that I'm stepping in. So I feel the universe aligning me with it. And I even have like Patrick is going to be spending time with me. So we're going to actually be able to like practice these together.
I'm going to New Mexico. I got to get out of the city. I was like, I've had it.
Quiet space. Yeah. Yeah. And even, and this is something that I said, I mean, I didn't randomly, but Universal moved to New Mexico. I just was like, I'm moving to New Mexico. I was called there. And I said, there's going to be a time about 10 years ago that I'm going to wake up with the sun and I'm going to have these rituals. I mean, I spoke all this, and now this program, you guys keep hearing me say that, and I'm probably going to keep saying it because it keeps ringing true. But I am, I've just been so close to some of these people for so long, and at least for me, and I can feel this fear and the sadness of letting go, because I think there is a reality that the relationships are going to change, and I am aware that change is inevitable, yet it's a little scary, and it, I don't know, it hurts, it makes me sad too, even though it is for me, and ultimately I want to be my best self, and that also includes perhaps not having certain people in my life on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It'll be such a challenging thing, especially for those of us who have big hearts and just want to love and want to share our love and support other people. I think it really does. For me, I noticed it, and I was like making some of these. It was when I started doing yoga, like 6 or 7 years ago, and going through a teacher training. I was meditating more, and I came back to the city to hang out with some of my friends, and I was like, my friends have changed. This is weird. Like, we don't talk about the same things. And then I realized I had to step back, and it's like, oh, I've changed. They're more or less the same. They're talking about the things that we were talking about. TV shows, you know, what's good on TV, who won what award, who's winning Drag Race. And I would sit in conversations and watch literal hours go by where we talked about anybody other than who was in the room. And that's even just my group of friends specifically, but I was like, what's going on here? Like, I care about you people. Like, I want to hear how you're doing, and we're talking around. So yeah, it was just a really brave acknowledgement to relationships change, you know, and we also don't know how then they're going to change in the future, you know, even beyond, we don't know kind of what cycles they're going to take. But again, I think I come back to that prioritization thing of like being able to ask yourself, like, what do I need right now? And to know that you're really in the seat of discernment to answer that question for yourself. Okay, cool. So grab a pen or paper or something that you can just jot some things down with. I'd love for us to go into one of these liberating structures. I find them to be super fun. And the one that I want to use today is called Triz. I don't actually know why it's called Triz. But in Triz, we do an exercise where for a minute, let me see, how do I want to do this? Why don't I get us together in pairs first? But yeah, they start off the description of Triz with a Pablo Picasso quote that says, every act of creation is first an act of destruction. And so the invitation is that we clear the space for innovation by helping a group. They designed this for like corporate America, but I think it's really great for like people on healing journeys too. So helping a group let go of what it knows, but rarely admits. Let go of what it knows, but rarely admits limits its success, right? Let go of what it knows limits its success by inviting creative destruction. Triz makes possible to challenge sacred cows safely and encourages heretical thinking. The question, what must we stop doing to make progress on our deepest purpose? And then let's like rewrite that. So basically like, what must I stop doing to make progress on giving myself my deepest rest, for example, right? Having my deepest rejuvenation, however you want to fill that in, induces seriously fun yet courageous conversations. And so basically what we do is we spend a minute going back and forth. I'll put us in pairs and spend a minute going back and forth, creating a list of things that you think will achieve the worst imaginable result for you having your early to bed routine, right? So I know I feel like Nancy's giving me a face like, why would I want to do that? But I want you to go through, use your imagination, work with your partner to create a list of the worst result imaginable with respect to your goal, which is to give yourself deep sleep, deep rejuvenation, right?
Can you give an example?
Yeah, so like I would watch Netflix and I would try to binge watch like all of Game of Thrones because it's really good and just obsessed. There's a lot of good sex scenes, and I would binge watch the entire first season so that would be one thing. I would eat a heavier later dinner. I would sleep with my lights on. I would sleep with the TV on. So these are just some things that are coming to mind. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So then after that, we're going to go through and you're going to identify. I'm not going to tell you the second instruction until after we all get back from our groups. I think that'll make it more fun. Okay, so let's go to pairs. I will join one of the breakout rooms. Create. So I guess we want 3 breakout rooms. And then let me do. Sorry, sometimes configuring these. Da, 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 da. All right, ready? So I'll give us about 2 minutes and then brainstorm. Use this as a brainstorming with one another and write down your lists. And then we'll get together again in groups. All right, here we go. Hopefully Joy got into hers. Joy, did you get into yours?
Are you with me?
I'm with you.
Did
I
it
do
not
want to
work?
make sure
Okay.
Joy. I want to make sure Joy got into hers. I'm just going to check really fast.
Okay.
I wanted to see if Joy was able to get in. Okay, it looks like she is.
Sorry. It was taking a while for me to get in. I think there's something going on with this computer.
No. Okay, I'll leave you two. Okay.
Can you hear me okay with the background noise?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
All right, so what's on our list?
It's funny, Netflix was one of mine because even though I used to be like, no TVs, but that I totally do that at times. And I know better.
I'm going to say making plans post 10 p.m.
Okay. If I choose to have wine after dinner.
So having wine after dinner.
Having wine after dinner. Watching Netflix.
How about sleeping with the lights on?
And like for me, like in my Hamis home, like going to Los Ojos more than once a week because it's just not necessary with my new rhythm. And then having more than 2 beers if I go that 1 week. That's when I have more than 2 is the sabotage.
Okay. I'll say, well, we already said Netflix. I feel like there's something to be like around engaging in really like challenging or mentally stimulating conversations late in the evening. So I guess I'll say serious / stimulating convo.
And then I'd say when I leave things undone, like my taxes and like daily tasks of, like I haven't done my acuity or set up a schedule. Like, so when I haven't like taken care of important tasks, and then it just swirls in my mind, and then I repeat it again the next night, and there adds on to the,
Cool. So then I'll tag onto that, not doing the dishes. Because it also feels like something's not complete in a way.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Anything else coming to mind?
No, those are pretty good for now. Oh wait, totally. Sorry. Social media.
Oh
like
yeah, social
looking
media.
Facebook or Instagram or like, yeah.
So staying on social media really late.
Yeah.
Okay.
And even past that sacred time of going to bed, just because it's like one more thing to start thinking about.
Yeah.
So those are mine.
I'm gonna close these.
Okay.
I'll see you back there. I got your carrot stuff.
You got what?
The carrot oil. Did you send me carrot oil or something?
I don't remember. I don't know.
From Hawaii.
Me.
So I thought you did.
No.
How funny. Welcome back.
Hey.
Did we come up with destructive lists? Kind of a
Joy,
weird exercise, right?
Glenn and I were giggling because when you put us into those like rooms, it feels like, ooh, who's my date? It feels like a blind date.
Wait, I honestly was like, I hope I don't get Patrick. And then I got Patrick.
Aww.
Being authentic.
All right, so to switch